"Never go to the ranch, Emily, promise me." Those words, spoken with unusual intensity, were one of the few demands my husband Frank made during our 24 years of marriage. I always respected his wishes, even when curiosity ate away at me. During those rare moments, he mentioned his childhood on a property in Colorado that he had left behind. But now, with Frank dead and the family inheritance in dispute, that promise is the only thing stopping me from unraveling the secrets he hid for so long. The ranch is not just a property. It is the key to the truth about who the man I loved was, and perhaps the only way to protect the legacy he left our family. But before we continue, make sure you are subscribed to the channel Grandma's Revenge Tales and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. For 22 years, I thought I knew every detail of Frank's life. We shared a house in Chicago, raised our daughter Jessica together, and built what I believed was a marriage without secrets. But the truth is that no one ever completely knows another person, not even when they share the same bed for more than 2 decades. The heart attack came without warning, taking Frank on an ordinary Tuesday while he was watching a documentary in the living room. I was preparing dinner when I heard the dull thud of his body hitting the floor. When I arrived, his eyes were already glassy, that empty look that no wife ever forgets. In an instant, I became a widow at 49. The next 2 weeks were a blur of funeral arrangements, awkward hugs from friends who did not know what to say, and the unbearable task of organizing his belongings. It was while emptying his sock drawer that I found the small wooden box hidden at the bottom. Inside was an antique brass key tied to a keychain with a tree symbol I did not recognize. What key is this? I asked the empty room as if Frank could answer me. I had never seen that key in all our years together. 3 days later, I received a call that would begin to answer that question. "Mrs. Emily Miller, I am David Vance, your husband's lawyer." His voice was formal and professional. "We need to schedule a meeting regarding some assets that were not mentioned in the initial inventory." The lawyer's office had that characteristic smell of old books and polished wood. David, a middle-aged man with thin-rimmed glasses, placed a folder in front of me. "Your husband bought a property in Colorado 4 years ago, a ranch called Greenwood Ranch." He adjusted his glasses. According to the documents, he visited the place regularly, claiming business trips. My throat went dry. Frank had never mentioned any property in Colorado. Our vacation trips were always to the coast or to visit family. The supposed business trips never seemed suspicious to me. His engineering firm often sent him on site visits. This does not make sense," I managed to say. "Frank would have told me about a ranch." David slid a sealed envelope across the table. "He left this for you with instructions to deliver it after his death in case the property was revealed." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Frank's familiar handwriting jumped off the paper, making my heart shrink. "My dear Emily, if you are reading this, it means I have left too soon and you discovered Greenwood. I know you must be confused and maybe hurt because I kept this secret. It was not for lack of trust or love, but because I wanted to create something perfect before revealing it. The property is yours now. I ask only that you go just once before deciding what to do with it." On the desk in the main house, there is a laptop. The password is the date of our first kiss, followed by your maiden name. "I love you more than words can express. Frank." Tears ran down my face when I finished reading. A secret property? A mysterious laptop? What other secrets had Frank kept from me? "The deed was automatically transferred to your name," David continued. "But there is something else you must know." He hesitated. "Frank's family in Colorado is contesting the will." Family in Colorado. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Frank did not have family in Colorado. His parents passed away years ago and he was an only child. The lawyer adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. "Apparently, your husband had 3 half-brother sons from his father's second marriage, whom Frank never mentioned. They claim the purchase of the property was made with family inheritance funds that should have been divided. My world was crumbling. First a secret property, now a secret family. Who was the man I had shared my life with? The ranch is located in a region where oil was recently discovered, David added almost as an afterthought, which makes the dispute particularly complicated. I left the office with the antique key weighing in my pocket like lead. I needed to see this place for myself to understand why Frank had hidden so much from me for so long. The next morning, I boarded a flight to Denver and rented a car for the 2-hour drive to the small town of Silver Creek. The GPS guided me through winding roads, cutting through green mountains each mile, taking me deeper into the unknown territory of my own marriage. The gates of the ranch appeared like a vision from another world. Huge wooden structures with the name Greenwood Ranch carved in wrought iron. My hand trembled as I inserted the antique key into the rusted lock. The click of the mechanism echoed like a gunshot in the silence of the rural afternoon. The dirt road wound for almost a mile, flanked by majestic oak trees that probably gave the property its name. On the horizon, a 2-story Spanish colonial-style house emerged, painted in a soft yellow with deep blue accents. It was not a simple ranch, but an impressive estate that looked like it came out of a history book. I parked in front of the wide porch and stayed in the car for a few minutes, trying to calm my breathing. The reality of the situation hit me with renewed force. This was not just a visit to an unknown property, it was a pilgrimage to the heart of my husband's secrets. When I finally gathered the courage to get out of the car and climb the porch steps, the key turned smoothly in the front door lock. And when I opened the door, I found something that made me lose my breath completely. Every wall of the entrance hall was covered with paintings of horses, magnificent works of art portraying the animals I had always loved passionately. Horses galloping in open fields, colts playing in green pastures, mares caring for their young. It was a gallery dedicated to my secret passion, the one I had abandoned after art school to pursue a more practical career as a teacher. How did he know? I barely mentioned my love for horses, having kept that passion in some forgotten corner of my heart after our daughter was born and daily life took control. But here, it was splendidly displayed in dozens of carefully selected paintings. And there, on the desk near the panoramic window, was the laptop he had mentioned in the letter. As I walked toward it, I heard the sound of vehicles on the gravel driveway. Through the window, I saw 3 cars approaching a shiny black SUV leading the convoy. Before they even parked, I knew instinctively who they were. The family I never knew Frank had coming to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. The noise of the engines died down as the vehicles stopped in front of the house. There was no time to explore the laptop now. I needed to face what was coming. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart, and watched 3 men emerging from the black SUV. The resemblance was striking. The oldest could be Frank in 20 years. The same deep eyes, the same upright posture, the same determined chin. The other 2 shared family characteristics clear enough to leave no doubt about the kinship. They were definitely his brothers. Before they could reach the door, I ran toward the laptop and opened it quickly. I typed the password. 11:07 July 1999 Smith, the date of our first kiss and my maiden name. The screen lit up instantly, revealing a folder titled, "For Emily." Inside were hundreds of video files ordered by dates starting from the day after the funeral and extending for a whole year into the future. I clicked on the first file, and Frank's face filled the screen. Not the pale and tired Frank of the last few months, but vibrant and healthy, as I had known him for years, obviously recorded months before. "Hello, my love." He began, his familiar smile making my heart skip a beat. "If you are watching this, it means I am dead, and you discovered Greenwood. I know you must be confused, maybe even angry with me for keeping secrets." Firm knocks on the door interrupted the video. I quickly put the laptop in sleep mode and headed to the entrance. Through the ornate glass, I could see the silhouettes of the 3 men waiting. I opened the door just enough to speak to them. "Can I help you?" The oldest one stepped forward. "I am Robert Miller." These are my brothers, Andrew and Gary. You must be Emily Frank's widow." The way he said widow had a slight tone of disdain that did not go unnoticed. "Yes, and this is my property now. That is what we need to talk about." Robert replied, his tone falsely cordial, not matching the hardness in his eyes. "This ranch has belonged to the Miller family for generations. Frank did not have the right to sell it just to himself. My husband bought this property legally. I have all the documents. Documents can be challenged, the second man, Andrew, intervened, especially when they involve family members with undisclosed health issues. That took me by surprise. Health issues. Can we come in to discuss?" Robert asked, already moving toward the door, as if my answer was irrelevant. "Actually, no. I am tired from the trip and need time to settle in. We can schedule for tomorrow." The three exchanged looks, clearly displeased with my refusal. "Tomorrow, then, at 10 o'clock, Robert accepted grudgingly. "But know this, Emily, we have substantial proof for our claim. It would be better for everyone if we could reach an amicable agreement." After they left, I ran back to the laptop, anxious to continue Frank's video. He seemed to foresee exactly what had just happened. "My brothers probably already showed up," he continued when I resumed the video. "They never cared about the ranch until they discovered oil in the region. But there is something I need to tell you first, something I hid from you and Jessica." He took a deep breath, his face suddenly serious. 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a hereditary heart condition. The doctors gave me 3 to 5 years. I decided not to tell. I did not want our last years together to be overshadowed by pity or constant fear. My hand flew to cover my mouth. Frank knew he was dying. For years, he carried that weight alone while I remained completely oblivious. When I received the diagnosis, I decided to use the time I had left to create something meaningful for you. I knew you always loved horses, always spoke of having your own studio one day. I found this ranch for sale, ironically the property I left behind at 18, swearing never to return. The pieces were starting to fit. Frank rarely spoke about his childhood, mentioning only that he had left home young to study engineering in Chicago, and never went back. I always respected his reluctance to discuss the matter, assuming it had been a difficult time he preferred to forget. I bought the ranch from my father before his death. He was bankrupt after years of mismanagement and alcoholism. He sold it to me for a fraction of the real value, making me swear secrecy to my half-brothers, who still believed they would inherit it one day. Another secret revealed. Frank's father had not died when he was a teenager, as he had always told me. There was a whole family narrative that I was completely unaware of. The ranch was in ruins when I bought it, just as it was in my childhood. But this time I had resources to transform it. On every business trip in the last few years, I was here supervising the renovation building. Something for you. The video continued with Frank explaining how he had discovered the oil potential on the property, how his brothers, who always looked down on him as the bastard son of the father's first marriage, suddenly showed interest in the ranch, how he had anticipated their attempts to contest the will. In the bottom drawer of the desk, there is a blue folder with all the necessary legal documents. The ranch is unquestionably yours. I made sure of that, but whether you choose to keep it or sell it is entirely your decision. I built this place for you. I filled it with beauty for you, but I do not want it to become a burden. I opened the drawer and found the blue folder exactly where he had indicated. Inside, dozens of documents meticulously organized. The original deed transfer records, tax payments, everything perfectly in order. One last thing. Frank continued, in the video in the stables, you will find 4 horses, all the breeds you always admired. The team I hired will continue to take care of them. Whether you want to be here or not, they are my last gift to you. The video ended, leaving me in tears. Frank had created this secret refuge not out of selfishness, but as a final act of love. He knew he was dying, and instead of overwhelming me with that reality, he channeled his energies to create something beautiful for my future without him. I decided to explore more of the property before nightfall. I went out the back door and followed the stone path that wound through meticulously planned gardens until I reached the stables. The structure was impressive, treated wood modern facilities, spacious stalls. An older man appeared from one of the stalls, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Mrs. Emily," he asked, greeting respectfully. "I am Anthony, the ranch manager. Your husband spoke a lot about you." He did. He spoke about me all the time. He said you had a special gift with horses, something he never managed to understand completely. My heart shrank again. Frank had observed that passion in me even when I myself had buried it under the responsibilities of adult life. "The horses have been here for more than a year." Anthony continued guiding me through the stables. "Your husband chose each one personally. That black Lusitano was especially difficult to find. He said it looked like a horse in a painting you loved." Tears blurred my vision again. Frank was referring to a painting by Stubbs that I had admired in an exhibition almost 15 years ago. A small comment made casually that he had kept all this time. "Did he speak about his health?" I asked hesitantly. Anthony paused. Not directly, but in the last few months he worked like a man running against time, always adding more details, more improvements, as if he knew his deadline was running out. As I admired the horses, another piece of the puzzle fit. Frank had never shown a special interest in horses during our marriage, but had always supported my occasional visits to ranches or equestrian events. Now I understood. He had his own history with these animals. Anthony, did Frank have horses when he was a child here? The man smiled sadly. "Only one. A chestnut named Storm. It was his refuge in the hard times with the father and the brothers. When he went to college, the brothers sold the animal just to hurt him. It was the last straw that made him cut ties with the family." This revelation hit me like a physical impact. The horses were not just a gift for me. They represented the recovery of something precious that had been stolen from him. Every detail of this ranch carried layers of meaning that I was barely beginning to understand. Back at the main house, I spent hours watching more videos Frank had left. In each one, he revealed another piece of his life that he had kept hidden. The difficulties of his childhood with an alcoholic father and cruel half-brothers, his struggle to rebuild his identity in Chicago, and most painfully, the last few years, living silently with a death sentence. "I did not want to steal our joy," he explained in a video. "Every laugh, every happy moment would have been tainted by the knowledge of what was coming. It was selfish maybe, but I chose happiness instead of the truth. I hope you can forgive me for that." How could I not forgive him? Still, a part of me ached for not having had the opportunity to be there for him, to help him carry that weight, to consciously cherish our final moments together. The next morning, I woke up determined to defend Frank's last gift. His brothers would arrive in a few hours, and I needed to be ready to face them. Not just for me, but for Frank, and for everything he had sacrificed to create this sanctuary. What I did not know was that Robert, Andrew, and Gary brought more than legal claims. They brought Frank's last secret one that not even he had discovered in time to tell me. At 10 o'clock sharp, the gravel of the driveway announced the arrival of the Miller brothers. This time, besides the black SUV, there was a smaller car following them. I watched through the window as 4 people emerged from the vehicles. The 3 brothers and a woman I recognized immediately despite the distance. Jessica, my daughter, who should be in Chicago finishing her semester at medical school, was there walking beside the men who sought to take our inheritance. My blood froze. How had they found her? Why was she with them? The betrayal seemed even sharper coming from my own daughter. Before I could fully process the situation, I opened the door. "Jessica, what are you doing here?" My 21-year-old daughter, with her father's same dark eyes, ran to hug me, but there was something tense in her demeanor. Mom, the uncles explained everything to me about Dad and the ranch. "Why didn't you tell me? They said there is oil here worth millions." "Uncles." The words sounded bitter in my ears. "Jessica, you barely know these men." "But they are Dad's family," she protested. Uncle Robert showed me photos of Dad as a child, told me stories of his childhood here. Robert stepped forward, extending his hand as if we were old friends. Emily, I think we started on the wrong foot yesterday. We came with a fair proposal that benefits all of us as a family. I refused to shake his hand. Come in, but I want to make it clear that any discussion will be based on the legal documents Frank left, not on manipulative, emotional appeals. The living room that yesterday seemed like a sanctuary of beauty now transformed into a battlefield. The Miller brothers settled in like invaders planning a conquest, while Jessica sat uncomfortably between us, clearly torn in her loyalties. Our proposal is simple. Robert began, his tone falsely reasonable. We divide the property into 4 equal parts, 1 for you, 1 for Jessica, and 2 for us 3 brothers. The oil exploitation rights would be managed jointly. That seems fair, Mom Jessica intervened, already convinced by their rhetoric. This way, we keep the ranch in the family and we all benefit. I looked at my daughter, trying not to show my disappointment that she had been so easily manipulated. Jessica, there is a lot you do not know about this situation. Your father left videos explaining everything. Videos. Her eyes widened. Dozens of them, including one, specifically for you, explaining why he kept secrets about his illness and about his brothers. Robert exchanged alarmed looks with Andrew. What videos are those? Instead of answering, I opened the laptop and navigated to the folder titled, For Jessica, When Doubt Arises. Frank had foreseen exactly this moment. Watch this first, I suggested to my daughter. Then we can discuss any proposal. While Jessica watched the video with headphones, a specific request from Frank, so his words would be for her ears only. I watched the expressions of the Miller brothers. They were visibly uncomfortable, realizing they had underestimated how much Frank had prepared. Jessica's face changed gradually while she watched surprise, sadness, and finally indignation. When it ended, she took off the headphones with trembling hands. "You lied to me," she said, turning to the men she called uncles hours before. "My father was not the bastard son who abandoned the family. You kicked him out, sold his horse, stole his share of the inheritance. They are half-truths. Told by a bitter man, Andrew defended himself. Frank was always dramatic about the past. Robert tried to regain control of the situation. Regardless of old family feuds, we are here to resolve the present. This property belonged to the Millers for generations. And now it belongs to me, I stated with a calm I did not feel. Frank bought it legally from your father. I have all the documents, even the original contract signed, registered, and notarized. Our father was not in his right mind when he sold the ranch, argued Gary, speaking for the first time. He was an alcoholic, he was in debt. We can easily contest the legal validity of the sale. You can try, I replied, standing up to get the blue folder Frank had prepared. But your brother anticipated that too. I opened the folder and took out a set of documents. This is a complete psychological evaluation of your father, conducted 1 week before the sale of the ranch, attesting to his full mental capacity. And these are financial reports showing that Frank paid market value for the property, not a price below as you suggest. Robert paled visibly. That can be forged. I doubt a judge would agree, considering everything was notarized by multiple independent professionals. I took out another document, and here is something that might interest you particularly. A declaration signed by your father confirming that Frank was in fact his legitimate son and had every right to buy the family property. The silence that followed was absolute. The Miller brothers had arrived expecting to find an emotionally vulnerable widow and a naive niece. Instead, they faced an impenetrable wall, built patiently by Frank over the years. That is not all, I continued, pressing the advantage. Frank discovered the oil potential long before any public announcement. He hired geologists who did a complete mapping of the property. I took out another set of documents, detailed maps, showing reserve estimates, quality analysis value projections. The eyes of the 3 brothers widened, realizing the extent of the information Frank had gathered. Most of the oil is not in the east section of the property where companies are currently drilling. It is in the west section in the hills that look worthless, which conveniently you excluded from your fair proposal." Andrew adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. "That is speculation." 3 independent evaluations agree, I countered. "The real value of this property is approximately 5 times higher than what you are suggesting in negotiations." Jessica, who had remained silent during this exchange, finally spoke. "You tried to use me to get to my mother. You talked about honoring my father's memory while trying to steal what he built for us. It is not exactly like that Robert tried to argue, but his position was clearly weakened. I ask you to leave my property now," I declared firmly. "If you want to continue this discussion, you can contact my lawyer." For a moment, I thought Robert was going to protest. His face hardened, his eyes darkening in a way that reminded me disturbingly of Frank's father in the few photographs I had seen. But then with a brisk gesture, he stood up. "This is not over, Emily." "Actually, Robert, it is over," I replied, keeping my voice controlled. Frank made sure of that. After they left, Jessica collapsed on the sofa, tears finally breaking through. "How could I be so stupid, Mom? They called me right after the funeral saying they were Dad's family, that they wanted to meet me, share memories of him I never had." I sat beside her, putting my arm around her shoulders. "They played with your grief, honey. They used your vulnerability and desire for connection with your father. Do not blame yourself for that." "Dad knew he was dying," she whispered. "All this time. Why didn't he tell us? He did not want our last years together to be defined by anticipated grief." I explained, repeating the words Frank had shared in the videos. He wanted us to live fully, not to wait for the inevitable. That afternoon, I showed Jessica the stables, introduced her to the horses, and we walked through the property her father had restored so lovingly. Anthony accompanied us, sharing stories about the transformation of the ranch in the last few years. "Mr. Frank worked tirelessly on this place," he told Jessica. "Every detail had to be perfect because he said you and your mother deserved only the best." In a particularly moving moment, Anthony took us to a gentle hill overlooking the entire property. There, under the shade of a centennial oak tree, we found a small bronze plaque fixed on a stone. "Storm, my first friend and my greatest teacher, may this land be a refuge for others as you were for me." "It was his horse, as a child," explained Anthony softly. "He ordered this memorial made in the first month after buying the ranch." Jessica knelt in front of the plaque, touching the engraved letters with her fingers. "I never knew Dad had a horse. He almost never spoke about his childhood." "Some pains are too deep to be expressed," I replied, understanding now the extent of the wounds Frank had carried silently. In the following days, Jessica and I continued watching the videos Frank had left. It was like having him back, even if only in digital images. He had created messages for specific dates, birthdays, graduations, even for Jessica's future wedding. Each video revealed another aspect of his love for us and another piece of the puzzle of his secret life. But peace would not last long. 2 weeks after our confrontation with the brothers, I received a call from David the lawyer. Emily Robert Miller filed a lawsuit formally contesting the will and the transfer of the property. They are claiming that Frank was mentally incapacitated when he bought the ranch due to his medical condition. "That is absurd," I protested. "Frank was perfectly lucid until his final moments. It is a delaying tactic," David explained. "They do not expect to win, they just want to create enough legal complications to force you into a settlement. The idea of a long judicial standoff frightened me. Jessica would need to return to college in Chicago in a few days, and I would have to face this alone. Even with all the documentation Frank had left, the prospect of fighting 3 determined men with substantial resources was intimidating." That night, while I watched another video of Frank, he seemed to answer my unspoken concerns. "I know it seems scary, Emily," he said, his face serious. "My brothers never accepted losing. But there is something I haven't shown you yet. Something that will guarantee your security in case they decide to take things to the extreme." He instructed me to find Anthony and ask him to show me the contingency file. What I found left me breathless. In the oldest barn on the property behind carefully stacked hay bales, Anthony revealed a hidden door leading to an underground basement. The lights turned on automatically as we descended the stairs, revealing a space that could only be described as a war room. On the walls, detailed maps of the property marked with precise locations of oil deposits. In meticulously organized files, incriminating documents on each of the Miller brothers' records of tax evasion, market manipulation, misappropriation of client funds. Frank had gathered an arsenal of information that could destroy the careers and reputations of the three men. "Mr. Frank was a cautious man," observed Anthony while I flipped through the documents stunned. He said he would never use this unless they forced him. He called it insurance against family betrayal. "How did he get all this?" I asked, marveling at the extent of the investigation. Years of patience and planning. After he discovered the illness, he became even more methodical. He said he wouldn't be here to protect you and your daughter, so he needed to leave you tools so you could protect yourselves. Among the documents, there was also the most surprising revelation evidence that Frank's father had another family in New Mexico, unknown even to Robert Andrew and Gary. Frank had located two younger half-siblings born from an extramarital relationship that lasted decades. Did he keep in touch with these siblings? I asked Anthony. No, he said he had no right to interrupt their lives with old stories, but he checked on them annually just to know they were okay. That was the Frank I knew, compassionate, even when it came to strangers, protective without being invasive. The contrast with the brothers I had met could not be starker. Armed with this new knowledge, I sent a succinct message to David. "I have information that will completely change our strategy. Come to the ranch tomorrow." 3 days later, Robert Miller called. His voice, previously confident and condescending, now sounded tense. "We are withdrawing the challenge to the will," he informed abruptly. "We accept the property as legally yours." What a sudden change. I commented, keeping my voice neutral. An uncomfortable silence preceded his response. "Your lawyer presented convincing information on why we should reconsider our position." David had delivered only a small sample of the documents Frank had compiled enough to demonstrate we had the power to destroy the Miller brothers without revealing the full extent of what we knew. "I am glad we can resolve this in a civilized manner," I replied. "Any other issues you would like to discuss?" Another even longer silence. "I have a medical condition," Robert finally admitted, "the same one Frank had, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. I need a partial liver transplant and our family blood type is rare. Your other brothers are not compatible. Jessica might be." The audacity of the request shocked me. After trying to steal our inheritance, they still expected Jessica to risk her health to save Robert. "That is a matter for Jessica to decide," I replied coldly. "But you should know that Frank found two other half-siblings of yours, children of your father, with a woman in New Mexico. They probably share the same rare genetic markers and could be compatible donors." The shock was audible in Robert's shallow breathing. "Other siblings. That is not possible. Their contact information is in an envelope I will leave with my lawyer." I continued. "I recommend you approach them with humility and honesty, not with the same manipulative tactics you used with Jessica." When I hung up, I felt an immense weight being lifted from my shoulders. The Miller brothers no longer represented a threat, and I had honored Frank's wish to use that information only as a last resort without publicly exposing their crimes. That night, I sat on the ranch porch admiring the sunset over the hills that were now indisputably mine. The horses grazed quietly in the nearby field, and the breeze brought the sweet scent of the oaks. "We did it, Frank," I murmured to the orange-tinted sky. "Your plan worked. With the threat of the Miller brothers neutralized, I could finally explore the ranch without the weight of anxiety." Every room in the main house revealed another aspect of Frank's meticulous care, from the library filled with my favorite authors to the kitchen equipped with every appliance I had ever mentioned wanting. It was during this quieter exploration that I discovered the locked door in the east hallway. Small and discreet, almost camouflaged by the wall decoration, I would have ignored it completely were it not for a specific video I saw that morning. "There is a place in the house that I kept especially for you, Emily," he had said in the recording. "A space just yours that might be the true heart of all this. The key is the same one that opened the ranch, but there is a secret. You need to turn it 3 times to the left before turning to the right." Intrigued, I followed his instructions. The lock mechanism gave way with a soft click, and the door opened to reveal what could only be described as a materialized dream. A complete art studio stretched out in front of me, bathed in perfect light, coming from strategically positioned windows, easels, blank canvases of all sizes, shelves organized with paints, brushes, pastels, and all the materials an artist could wish for. "My God," I whispered, turning slowly to absorb every detail. On the walls, Frank had hung empty frames of various sizes, each with a small plaque. For Emily's vision of Greenwood, for the portrait of Jessica by her mother, for the sunrise on the hills seen by Emily. In a corner, a flat box caught my attention. I opened it with trembling hands and found what I never imagined seeing again. My college paintings works I thought had been lost in our multiple moves. Frank had preserved them all these years, keeping them until I was ready to pick up the brush again. On top of the pile was my graduation self-portrait, the young artist full of dreams and possibilities that I had been before practical life took control. Next to it, a note in Frank's precise handwriting. "She is still there, my love, the artist you always were, even when the brushes were put away. I gave you the space, the time, the inspiration. The rest is up to you." I collapsed on the stool next to the window, crying openly. Not just for the renewed grief for Frank, but for the realization of how much he truly knew me, perhaps better than I knew myself. He had seen the sleeping artist in me during all those years I taught literature in schools, always postponing the dream of painting for later. In the following days, I shyly began to relearn the rhythm of the brush against the canvas. Hesitant hands at first, gradually regaining confidence. I painted the horses, the mountains at dawn, Jessica's profile against the afternoon sky. Every brushstroke was a conversation with Frank, a silent thank you for the gift he had given me. Not just the physical ranch, but the permission to rediscover myself. Meanwhile, the oil issue remained. Several companies had made substantial offers for the exploitation rights, some reaching values that made me dizzy just imagining. The potential wealth under those hills could guarantee financial security for Jessica and me for several generations, but something stopped me from signing any agreement. Every morning, walking through the property, observing the untouched nature, the majestic oaks, the wildlife finding refuge there, I questioned if oil extraction was the destiny Frank had imagined for Greenwood. The answer came like so many others in one of his videos. This one, cataloged for 6 months after his death, was specific about the issue, about the oil Emily. He began looking almost uncomfortable. When I discovered the deposits, I was initially tempted by the financial security they would provide. But the more time I spent transforming this ranch, the more I realized that its true value is not in what lies beneath it, but in what blooms above it. He paused, looking out the window behind him, the same view I now contemplated daily. "Oil companies are going to make you tempting offers. I rejected them all while I lived, but the decision is yours now. If you choose to sell the rights, make sure the extraction methods are the least invasive possible." But there is another option I discovered recently. Frank then explained about an environmental conservation program that paid landowners to keep ecologically sensitive areas untouched. Greenwood, with its unique biodiversity and springs feeding regional rivers, qualified fully. The payments are smaller than the potential value of the oil, he admitted, but enough for you to live comfortably, keep the ranch, and maybe expand the horse breeding if you wish. And most importantly, the land would remain untouched, a refuge as it was for me as a child. 2 days later, I definitively rejected all oil offers and started the process to register Greenwood as a private environmental reserve. The decision brought a sense of peace no amount of money could provide. It was then that Anthony approached me with another surprising revelation. Mr. Frank left one more project unfinished. He explained taking me to a set of small buildings near the ranch entrance away from the main house. He started renovating them in the last few months, but did not have time to finish. The 5 rustic little houses were in different stages of renovation. Frank had started transforming them into cozy cabins, each with a view of a different area of the property. What was his plan for these places? I asked, imagining some accommodation for additional staff. Anthony smiled. He wanted to create a small refuge for artists, a place where painters, writers, and musicians could spend seasons creating inspired by nature. He talked about how you always supported emerging artists when you taught how you missed places like this when you were young. The idea was so perfectly Frank, generous, even in his plans for after death, finding ways to extend opportunities he himself never had. And it was also perfectly suited for me, combining my love for art with my past as an educator. Let's finish this, I decided immediately, exactly as he planned. In the following months, I supervised the completion of the cabins, each equipped with basic supplies for different art forms. I worked with Anthony to develop an artist residency program that would select talented creators, without resources for a 3-month creative retreat at Greenwood. I named the project the Frank Miller Artist Residency, and the first class of 5 artists arrived exactly 1 year after his death. Watching them discover the ranch, get inspired by the same views that now fed my own paintings, brought a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced since my teaching days. Jessica, initially skeptical about my decision to stay at the ranch and reject the oil offers, gradually understood the vision coming to fruition. During her college breaks, she started offering basic medical exams to nearby rural communities, using one of the cabins as a makeshift clinic. I think I finally understand why Dad created this place. She confided in me one night while we watched the stars on the porch. It is not just about preserving something from the past, it is about creating something new from what was broken. The wisdom in her words moved me. Frank had transformed a place of painful memories into a sanctuary, not just for us, but for dozens of other people who now benefited from his vision, expanded by our hands. 6 months after the inauguration of the residency program, I received an unexpected letter. The envelope had the crest of a hospital in Chicago and contained a single sheet of paper with a brief message. Emily, I received a successful transplant from a donor who prefers to remain anonymous, although I have my suspicions about his identity. The illness I shared with Frank is in remission. I wanted you to know that I found our other siblings. They are good people, better than I was. Robert. I put the letter away without sharing it with anyone. Some cycles need to close silently without fanfare or public recognition. If Jessica had decided to donate part of her liver to save the uncle who had tried to harm us, that was a personal choice she had made without feeling the need to discuss. Forgiveness, as I learned, sometimes manifests in silent acts that require no witnesses. In my studio, I started a new series of paintings, not just of the horses or landscapes of Greenwood, but portraits of Frank based on frames from the videos. In each canvas, I captured a different aspect of him: the meticulous planner, the devoted lover, the protective father, the man with invisible wounds who never allowed them to make him bitter. I usually painted at sunset when the golden light flooded the studio and created that ethereal quality that exists only for a few precious minutes. Sometimes I had the strange sensation that he was there with me, watching with silent approval as I recovered the artist who had been asleep for so long. "I am painting again, Frank," I whispered once to the empty studio. "You always knew I would come back, didn't you?" The soft wind stirred the curtains as if in response, and in that moment I realized Frank had given me more than a ranch, more than financial security, more than a second chance at art. He had given me a new way to live, not as a survivor of devastating loss, but as the guardian of a legacy of love. that continued to grow and evolve even after his departure. Greenwood was not just a physical place. It was the materialization of the deep knowledge Frank had about me, a love so attentive that it anticipated my needs and desires before I even recognized them. And now I did the same for others, creating space for artists to discover their own voices, just as Frank had done for me. Time has a strange quality when you are grieving. The first months drag on endlessly, each day a battle simply to get up and keep going. Then suddenly you realize a whole year has passed in the blink of an eye. It was with that surprising awareness that I faced the last video of the initial series Frank had prepared, a message for the first anniversary of his death. Jessica came from Chicago specially for us to watch it together. Sitting side by side on the living room sofa with the soft autumn rain tapping on the windows, we watched the familiar face appear on the screen. "Hello, my loves." Frank began, his gentle smile so painfully familiar. If you are watching this, it means you survived the first year without me, perhaps the hardest of all. I hope the daily videos helped, that my presence, although virtual, softened the path. We exchanged emotional glances, Jessica and I. The videos had been anchors on stormy days, small oases of connection when Frank's absence seemed unbearable. From now on, the videos will be less frequent, one per month in the next year, than only on special occasions. Not because my love diminishes, but because I know you are finding your own way. My constant presence can eventually become more of an impediment than a comfort. His wisdom, even in this aspect, was impressive. Frank had understood that his daily voice, if continued indefinitely, could stop us from moving forward. However, there is a final folder on the laptop that I haven't revealed yet. It is titled, "When You Are Ready." It contains only one video, and you will know when it is the right moment to watch it. The message continued with precious memories, reflections on our time together, and hopes for our future. When it ended, Jessica and I remained in silence for long minutes, each absorbed in private thoughts. "Do you think we are ready for the final video?" Jessica finally asked. I considered the question carefully. "I do not know. Your father seemed to believe we would recognize the right moment. We decided to wait." There was something comforting in knowing that a last message awaited us like a treasure saved for a future moment when we needed special guidance. The following months brought significant changes to Greenwood. The artist residency program flourished, attracting candidates from all over the country. The Environmental Reserve received official certification, guaranteeing permanent protection for the local biodiversity. And my own art began to attract attention beyond the immediate circle of friends and visitors. It all started when Mariana Delgado, a renowned art critic who visited the ranch to learn about the residency program, saw my paintings in the studio. "These works have a quality I do not see." Often, she commented, studying my series of portraits of Frank. "There is an emotional honesty, a duality between loss and celebration that is deeply moving." 2 weeks later, I received an invitation to exhibit at the gallery she managed in Chicago. The idea of sharing my deeply personal art with the world was simultaneously terrifying and exciting. I had never imagined returning to the art world I had abandoned decades ago. "What do you think your father would say about this?" I asked Jessica during a video call showing her the invitation. Her answer was immediate and confident. "He would be absolutely radiant, Mom. Wasn't that the purpose of this whole place? To give the artist back to the world." I accepted the invitation. The months of preparation were intense, selecting works, creating new pieces specific to the exhibition, facing all the doubts and insecurities that arose. On opening night, I was stunned to see a line forming outside the gallery. The exhibition, titled Greenwood Portraits of a Foretold Love, attracted critics, collectors, and art lovers who seemed genuinely moved by the story behind the works. "Her paintings capture something rare," commented an influential critic. "The transformation of grief into celebration, the documentation of a love that transcends even death." Amidst the commotion, I noticed 3 men observing discreetly from the back of the gallery, Robert Andrew and Gary Miller. Our eyes met briefly. Robert nodded slightly before the three left quietly. No words were exchanged, no formal acknowledgement necessary. Their presence was simultaneously a white flag and an admission that Frank had won in every sense that mattered. When I returned to the ranch after the successful exhibition, I found a letter from the university hospital where Jessica studied medicine. They were interested in establishing a partnership with Greenwood, using part of the property for an equestrian rehabilitation program for children with special needs. Your husband's horses could serve a purpose beyond beauty, wrote the program director. They could become instruments of healing. The proposal seemed so perfectly aligned with Frank's vision that I could almost hear his voice approving the idea. In less than 6 months, we built specialized facilities, trained the horses, and received the first group of children. Watching those little faces lighting up during the hippotherapy sessions, seeing confidence grow in previously withdrawn children, brought a new dimension to Greenwood. The ranch became not just a refuge for artists, not just an environmental sanctuary, but also a place of healing. It was on an afternoon after a particularly moving session with a girl who had spoken her first words during equestrian therapy that I knew it was time. Jessica was visiting that weekend and sharing the story of the little patient during dinner. I saw in her eyes the same recognition. "We are ready," she said simply. That night after dinner, we opened the laptop and located the folder, "When You Are Ready." The single file contained a recording different from all previous ones. Instead of the office or the library where Frank usually filmed, the video showed him standing on the hill where the memorial for Storm was now. "Hello, my dears." He began, the wind gently ruffling his hair. He was visibly thinner than in the other videos probably recorded in the more advanced stages of his illness. If you are watching this, it means Greenwood became more than a property. It became a home, a mission, a purpose. And it means you are ready for the final secret I kept. He looked directly at the camera, an intensity in his eyes that made me hold my breath. When I bought this ranch, I did not know about the oil. I bought it for the horses, for the space for Emily to paint, for the peace I never found here as a child. But a few weeks later, while walking through the property, I found something buried near this oak tree. Frank moved aside, revealing a small wooden box in his hands. It is my mother's diary. My father said she died in childbirth, but I discovered she ran away when I was just a few months old, not for lack of love for me, but for fear of the man my father had become. Jessica squeezed my hand, both absorbing this revelation. In this diary, she describes how she hid something of great value on the ranch before leaving, not for herself, but for me, for when I grew up. Something my father searched for obsessively for years until the drink finally destroyed his health. Frank carefully turned the pages of the diary. Instead of immediately revealing the discovery, she brought it home to document it properly. When she realized she needed to flee from my father, she hid everything on the ranch, planning to return when it was safe. But she never had that chance. She died in an accident a few years later before she could recover the items or find me. Frank looked at the camera again, his eyes shining with emotion. Using the map and instructions in the diary, I found the spot. It is intact, sealed exactly as she left it. I did not take anything out, as this discovery rightfully belongs to the National Historical Heritage. But I wanted you to know the true treasure of this land was never the oil. It is a lost piece of our history preserved by an extraordinary woman I never had the chance to meet. He closed the diary carefully, putting it back in the box. In the secret drawer of the main desk, you will find this box with the diary and the map. The decision on what to do with this discovery is yours now. But I suggest you complete the work my mother started. Ensure these artifacts reach the place they belong, where they can be studied and appreciated by future generations. When the video ended, Jessica and I remained silent for a long moment, processing this final revelation. Then, as if moved by the same impulse, we got up and went to the desk. The secret drawer opened easily when pressed in the right spot, revealing the wooden box identical to the one we saw in the video. The diary was fascinating. Detailed observations of a passionate scientist mixed with concerns of a young mother in a desperate situation. Frank's mother, Elisa, described her discovery with academic precision. A set of documents and small artifacts from a 17th century Jesuit mission that had been completely erased from historical records, possibly due to conflicts with the Spanish crown of the time. The documents suggest the mission harbored indigenous people escaping slavery, I read aloud to Jessica. Elisa believed this could rewrite the history of indigenous resistance in this region. The map was detailed, marking a specific point in the western hills of the property, coincidentally the same area where the largest oil deposits were located. Now I understood completely why Frank had been so firm in protecting that land. We must look for this tomorrow. Jessica suggested, her eyes shining with the same curiosity that always animated her father's gaze. The next morning, we followed the map carefully through the most remote area of the ranch. The marked point was under a peculiar rock formation, partially hidden by dense vegetation. It took almost an hour to locate the entrance, a small natural opening in the rock, artificially widened and then skillfully disguised. What we found inside left us speechless. A natural cavern transformed into a hiding place, preserved by the dry climate of the region and isolation. Boxes sealed with beeswax contained parchment documents in surprisingly good condition. Small ceremonial artifacts, crucifixes carved with indigenous symbols, ceramic beads, ritual instruments blending Catholic and native traditions. "She was right," whispered Jessica, examining one of the documents carefully. "This is extraordinary." Following Frank's final instructions, we hired a team of respected archaeologists to document and preserve the discovery properly. The National Museum showed immense interest, classifying it as a revolutionary discovery for understanding relations between Jesuits and indigenous peoples in the colonial period. The formalization of the discovery brought unexpected attention to Greenwood. Journalists, historians, and academics visited, regularly fascinated as much by the artifacts as by the personal history behind their discovery. The young archaeologist who hid them to protect them, the son she never knew, but who ended up completing her mission. In an especially significant afternoon, I received a visit that closed another circle of the story. A woman of about 70 gray hair framing a face that seemed strangely familiar to me. "My name is Selena Miller," she introduced herself. "I was married to Peter, the man your husband knew as father." I invited her in, intrigued by her presence. We served coffee on the porch while she explained her connection to the story. Peter was not Frank's biological father, she revealed calmly. Elisa was already pregnant when they married. The real father was a fellow archaeologist who died during an expedition before the birth. Peter promised to raise the baby as his own, but after Elisa ran away, anger and a sense of betrayal consumed him. He transferred that resentment to Frank. This revelation explained so much about the tumultuous relationship Frank had with the man he believed to be his father. "How do you know all this?" I asked, absorbing the magnitude of this new piece of the puzzle. "Elisa wrote to me years later," explained Selena, "when she knew I had married Peter. She wanted me to understand the full story, perhaps, in the hope that I could protect Frank in some way. Unfortunately, when I received the letter, it was already too late. Frank had left and Peter was too sick to change. She took an aged envelope from her purse. "I thought you should have this. It is the last letter Elisa wrote before dying, addressed to Frank. It was never delivered." I accepted the envelope with trembling hands, feeling the weight of those unread words, of that maternal love never fully expressed. "Do you think Frank suspected?" I asked. "About his biological father, I do not know," Selena answered honestly. "But I think it is significant that he followed his mother's path in a way. Both preserved precious things for the future. Both protected what mattered, albeit silently." After Selena left, I sat in the studio with the unread letter, unsure of what to do. Part of me felt I should preserve it along with the diary and artifacts, another piece of this extraordinary story. Another part believed a mother's words to a son were too sacred to become exhibits. Finally, I decided to share it only with Jessica, the only other person with a legitimate right to this part of Frank's history. When she arrived for her monthly visit, we read it together by candlelight in the studio. Elisa's words were of regret, explanation, and above all, love. She described how she had tried to return for Frank years later, only to discover Peter had moved without a trace. How she had spent years searching until illness prevented her from continuing. "What hurts me most," she wrote, "is knowing you may have grown up believing you were not loved. I want you to know that every day away from you was agony, that my last thought will be of you, my son, hoping you found happiness and purpose even without my presence." We cried together, Jessica and I, for all the missed connections, for the silences Frank carried for the mother he never knew loved him so deeply. But there was also a strange sense of completeness, the circle finally closing, secrets coming to light. Dad did it, didn't he? Jessica reflected, wiping her tears. He transformed all these broken stories into something whole. Yes, I agreed, looking out the window at the ranch blooming under our stewardship. I believe that was his greatest skill, seeing beauty and possibility, where others saw only ruins. In the following months, Greenwood expanded even further in its mission. Besides the artist residency program and hippotherapy, we developed an educational center in partnership with universities focused on the indigenous and colonial history of the region. The discovered artifacts, now properly preserved in the National Museum, were reproduced for educational purposes, allowing students and visitors to understand the importance of the Jesuit mission and its significance for the history of the West. My art continued to evolve, inspired not only by the natural beauty of the ranch, but also by the layers of history and meaning we continually discovered. I started a new series, Personal Archaeologies, exploring how objects and places carry memories and stories invisible to casual eyes. One afternoon while I was painting in the studio, I received an unexpected call from Robert Miller. Emily. His voice sounded different, less arrogant, more reflective. "I am calling to inform you we are formally dissolving any legal challenge related to Greenwood. The documents are being sent to your lawyer. Thanks for letting me know," I replied cautiously. There was a pause. "I also wanted to thank you," he continued, surprising me. "The information about our other siblings changed a lot of things for me, for all of us. Did you find them? Yes, they are remarkable people. They did not deserve to be denied as they were. We are trying to build some kind of relationship now." After hanging up, I reflected on how Frank's secrets continued to create ripples of transformation even after his death. The brothers who had tried to usurp his inheritance now faced their own family truths, possibly finding some redemption in the process. As the second year without Frank approached its end, I realized something fundamental had changed. Grief was still present, a silent companion that would probably never leave me completely. But it no longer defined me. Greenwood was no longer just the last gift of a deceased husband. It was a living and evolving organism nourished by many hands, many stories, many intertwined purposes. On a particularly glorious spring morning, I found myself again under the centennial oak where Frank had placed the memorial for Storm. The horses grazed quietly in the field below the green hills, stretched to the horizon, and the distant sound of laughter came from the educational center, where a group of children learned about the history of the artifacts. "Look what we built from what you started," I murmured to the air scented with wildflowers. "I hope you are proud." A soft breeze stirred the golden leaves above, sending small yellow petals raining around me like cosmic confetti. I'm not particularly superstitious, but in that moment, I felt deeply that Frank was answering in his own way. I went back to the studio with renewed inspiration, starting a new canvas. Not a portrait of Frank this time, but a self-portrait. The woman I had become, stronger, wiser, standing firm in a field of golden oaks, looking not at the past, but at the horizon of possibilities opening in front of me. 5 years have passed since I found Frank's secret key. Greenwood flourished beyond any expectation, transforming into a vibrant cultural, educational, and therapeutic center, benefiting thousands of people annually. The artist residency program was now nationally recognized with a 2-year waiting list. The original cabins had been supplemented by a collective studio and a small gallery where residents could exhibit their creations. Artists who passed through Greenwood frequently mentioned in interviews how the place had transformed their perspectives and creative processes. The educational center initially focused only on the archaeological discovery expanded to include programs on environmental sustainability and the unique flora and fauna of the region. Schools from all over the state brought students regularly, and we developed scholarships for young people from underprivileged communities interested in history, archaeology, or conservation. Hippotherapy started as a small project in partnership with the university hospital, grew into a complete therapeutic center. Jessica, now graduated in medicine and specializing in pediatric neurology, supervised the program during her days off, bringing updated scientific knowledge to improve treatment protocols. As for me, my artistic trajectory had taken an unexpected turn. After 3 successful exhibitions in Chicago and Denver, I was invited for a residency in Europe, followed by an international exhibition that took my personal archaeologies to audiences I never imagined reaching. It was strange at 54 to find myself in the middle of a blooming artistic career, one that should have started 3 decades earlier were it not for the detour life imposed. But there was a richness in my works that perhaps wouldn't exist if I had followed a more conventional path. The layers of experience loss, rediscovery, and renewal brought a depth critics frequently highlighted as the distinguishing feature of my work. On a particularly significant afternoon, I received an email that made me sit up abruptly, my heart racing. It was from the National Endowment for the Arts informing me I had been selected to receive the Lifetime Achievement Award, a prestigious recognition usually granted to artists with careers much longer than mine. Her unique journey starting in youth, interrupted for decades, and resurfacing with extraordinary force, represents the persistence of the creative impulse. Read the notification. Her story and work serve as inspiration for artists of all ages, facing interruptions or detours in their creative paths. While I absorbed those words, my gaze wandered to Frank's portrait, occupying a place of honor in the studio. Not one of the ones I had painted, but a simple photograph of him smiling taken on our patio in Chicago a few years before his illness. It seemed he was smiling directly at me, sharing this moment of validation. "You always knew, didn't you?" I murmured to the photograph. "You always believed this day would come, even when I had given up completely." The awards ceremony coincided with the 6th anniversary of Frank's death. Initially, I considered asking for a postponement, reluctant to associate a celebration with such a painful date. But then I reconsidered. What more appropriate way to honor the man who had restored my art than to receive this recognition on the day marking his physical departure? Jessica accompanied me to the event in Chicago, stunning in a navy blue dress that highlighted her increasing resemblance to her father. At 27, she combined Frank's practical determination with my artistic sensibility, a perfect synthesis of the two of us. During my acceptance speech, I spoke openly about the journey that had led me there, the abandoned youthful dreams, the years of teaching that, although rewarding, had left a creative void, and the devastating loss that paradoxically had opened the path for my artistic rebirth. My late husband Frank used to say that our greatest gifts often come disguised as our greatest losses. I shared with the attentive audience. He transformed a property of painful memories into a sanctuary that now benefits hundreds of people annually, and through that transformation, he allowed me to finally find myself again as an artist. After the ceremony, amidst congratulations and glasses of champagne, Jessica pulled me to a quiet corner. "I have something to tell you," she said, a special sparkle in her eyes. "I am pregnant." The news hit me with a wave of conflicting emotions. Immense joy for the new life, sadness for Frank not being here to meet his grandchild, awe at the speed with which life continued to move forward. "It is a boy," continued Jessica. "I want to name him Frank." I hugged my daughter, speechless to express everything I felt. A new Frank would enter our lives, bringing continuity to a story that seemed to have been brutally interrupted. That night in my hotel room, I dreamed of Frank. Not an anguished dream of loss like the ones that tormented me in the first year after his death, but a calm and comforting presence. He was smiling proud, as if saying, "See, life continues in ways we cannot foresee, but always with beauty." Upon returning to Greenwood, I found new energy to implement projects I had been considering for months. The first was the creation of scholarships for single mothers wishing to return to school or explore artistic careers. I named it the Elisa Program in honor of Frank's mother, who never had the chance to resume her own career. We also started building a library specialized in art, indigenous history, and environmental conservation, open not only to residents and program participants, but to the entire local community. It was important to me that Greenwood never became an isolated enclave of privilege, but remained rooted and accessible to the region hosting it. As little Frank grew in Jessica's belly, I started a special series of paintings documenting the wait. Not just conventional pregnancy portraits, but visual explorations of continuity, of renewal of the way time folds upon itself when generations overlap. When he was born on a winter dawn, I was the first person Jessica called. I drove to the hospital in Denver, driving through the night with my heart full of anticipation. Holding that small bundle for the first time, I searched for features of my Frank in his face. "He has his father's chin," commented Jessica, exhausted but beaming. "And that dimple on the left side when he smiles." In the following months, I watched fascinated as small gestures and expressions of my late husband occasionally crossed the baby's face. A focused look, a particular way of furrowing his brow when he was displeased. Genetically impossible, of course, since little Frank shared no blood with his namesake grandfather. Still, there were moments when the resemblance seemed so strong it made me freeze momentarily. "It is just your imagination, Emily," I told myself. "The mind sees what it wants to see." When the baby was almost a year old, Jessica decided to move permanently to Greenwood. Her work at the hospital in Denver could be combined with remote research and supervision of the therapeutic center at the ranch. "I want Frank to grow up here," she explained, using the affectionate nickname we had already adopted for the child. Surrounded by art-nature history, everything Dad valued. The main house, previously so vast for me alone, gained new life with the constant presence of Jessica and my grandson. Children's laughter echoed through the halls, colorful toys occupied previously empty corners, and the daily rhythm adjusted to the needs of a small child. It was during this period that I received unexpected correspondence from the University of Colorado. A historical research department had crossed old records with information from Elisa's diary, discovering something extraordinary about the hidden Jesuit mission. The document suggests the mission harbored not only fugitive indigenous people, but also African slaves, freedmen and settlers persecuted for religious reasons, explained the professor leading the research. It represented a unique experiment of a multicultural community in the middle of the colonial period, actively challenging established power structures. This revelation raised the historical importance of the discovery even further. Historians now considered the mission of the Holy Cross of Refugees, as it was formally named, based on the documents as evidence of intercultural resistance previously unknown in the colonial West. An unexpected consequence was the renewed interest from indigenous communities and descendants of freedom seekers in the region, who saw in the mission's history a validation of their own narratives of resistance. We started receiving requests for educational visits and soon developed a specific program to share the history with these groups, always respecting their primary right of connection to this past. In one of those visits, I met Mrs. Juana, an elder, whose knowledge of medicinal herbs and traditional practices was legendary in the region. After exploring the educational exhibition about the mission, she took me to a quiet corner. "This land was always special," she said simply. Our ancestors knew its secrets. It is good that you are taking care of it now." Her words confirmed what I already felt intuitively, that our administration of Greenwood was not mere possession, but a form of temporary custody of something much older and significant than our individual lives. One afternoon, while I was supervising the library expansion, Anthony approached me with a worried expression. "The Millers are here," he informed. "The 3 brothers plus 2 people I do not recognize." My body instantly filled with tension. Despite the formal dissolution of any legal dispute, the unexpected arrival of the 3 brothers rarely meant good news. I met them in the main garden, Robert, Andrew, and Gary, accompanied by a man and a woman, sharing unmistakable family features. Emily Robert stepped forward, extending his hand. "I apologize for the visit without prior notice. We wanted to formally introduce you to Roger and Mary, our siblings from New Mexico." The newly discovered half-siblings approached smiling shyly. Mary especially had the same kind of eyes as Frank, deep reflective with little wrinkles in the corners when she smiled. "It is an honor to meet you," said Mary softly. "We heard so much about this place and the incredible work you have done here." The initial tension dissipated as we walked through the property, showing them the various ongoing projects. The 5 Miller siblings, 3 Frank had known and rejected, 2 he never had the chance to meet, seemed genuinely impressed with the transformation of Greenwood. During coffee on the porch, Robert explained the true purpose of the visit. After we reconciled with Roger and Mary, we started reflecting on our family legacy, he said, exchanging glances with the other brothers. We realized we wasted decades in petty resentments and greed, while Frank, even having suffered more than all of us, chose to create something positive. Andrew continued, "We decided to establish a family foundation to support causes related to historical and environmental preservation. We would like the first project to be a partnership with Greenwood. The proposal they presented was substantial. Funding to significantly expand the educational center, allowing us to receive more students from underprivileged communities and develop training programs in archaeology, environmental conservation, and arts." "Why?" I asked directly, still cautious, despite the apparent sincerity. After everything that happened, it was Gary, traditionally the quietest of the 3, who answered. "Because Frank was right," he said simply. "About the ranch, about the family, about how to live a life with purpose." We took a long time to understand that Mary added, "and because maybe this is the only way to finally become the family we should have been from the start. We didn't manage to do that when Frank was alive, but maybe we can honor what he built now." I looked at those 5 faces, all carrying fragments of the same genetic legacy, all marked in different ways by the choices and secrets of a man who was long gone. There was sincerity in their eyes, a genuine desire for redemption. "Frank believed in second chances," I finally replied. "He himself built one from the ruins of this ranch. I believe he would approve of this partnership." In the following months, we worked to formalize the collaboration. The Miller Foundation for Preservation and Education became a reality with a board of directors, including representatives from all branches of the family, plus independent specialists in each field. On a quiet afternoon, watching little Frank play happily with his great-uncles during a Miller family visit, I realized Frank had won a final victory he could never have anticipated. He had not only protected his material legacy and realized his dreams for the ranch, but had inadvertently catalyzed the healing of family wounds stretching for generations. That night, I took the laptop where I still kept Frank's videos. Although I rarely watch them now, occasionally I return to them in significant moments. I selected a video from the second year where he spoke about forgiveness and second chances. "Sometimes, Emily," he said, his serene face filling the screen, "the best kind of revenge is simply living well, not wasting energy on resentments. My brothers may have tried to harm me, but my true victory was building a life so full of love and purpose that their actions lost all power over me." I closed the laptop, thoughtful. Frank had never imagined his brothers would find redemption. He had never planned that Greenwood would become the catalyst for the reconciliation of his entire fragmented family. But somehow, the impulse of healing he had started continued to expand in ever-widening circles, touching lives he had not even known. It was a kind of immortality no monument could provide, the continuous positive transformation resulting from choices made with love even in the face of loss and suffering. 10 years after finding the mysterious key among Frank's belongings, Greenwood had transformed completely. What started as a secret refuge of a man who knew he was dying became a vibrant cultural, educational, and therapeutic center benefiting thousands of people annually. The partnership with the Miller Foundation allowed expansions I would never have imagined possible. The educational center now included dormitories for students from distant regions, archaeological and environmental research labs, and a specialized library with over 10,000 volumes. The artist residency program was expanded to include all forms of expression, not just visual arts, but also literature, music, dance, and theater. Resident artists frequently collaborated with the Therapeutic Center, developing innovative programs combining artistic expression with healing processes. My own art continued to evolve. After 2 decades absent from the brushes, I had made up for lost time with almost frantic productivity in the first few years. Now at 59, I worked with more deliberation and reflection. My works were regularly exhibited in national and international galleries, often contextualized by the extraordinary story of my late return to artistic practice. Little Frank, now 9 years old, grew up as an integral part of this unique environment. He was homeschooled with private tutors, supplemented by in-person classes in the nearest town, but his true education came from daily immersion in a world where art, science, history, and healing intertwined organically. He was an extraordinary child, curious, compassionate, with an unusual capacity to connect with people of all ages and backgrounds. He spent hours with resident artists absorbing techniques and perspectives. He accompanied archaeologists on small excavations, meticulously cataloging every discovery. He attended hippotherapy sessions, developing an intuitive understanding of how horses responded to different emotional and physical needs. On a particularly glorious autumn afternoon, I found him sitting alone under the centennial oak, the memorial for Storm at his feet, a sketchbook in his lap. "What are you drawing, Frank?" I asked, sitting beside him. He showed me a surprisingly skillful sketch for his age, the black Lusitano, the one Frank had chosen especially for resembling the painting I had admired years ago. "I am practicing horses," he explained seriously. "I want to paint like you one day." Something in the way he held the pencil in the angle of his head while he critically evaluated his own work was so reminiscent of Big Frank that I felt a knot in my chest. This child, who had never met his namesake grandfather, seemed to have inherited not only his name, but also fragments of his spirit. Did Grandpa like to draw? He asked casually, adding details to the horse's mane. "Actually, no," I replied, smiling at the memory. "Your grandfather was an engineer. He drew blueprints and projects, but said he had no talent for creative art. His admiration for art was as a spectator, not a creator. But he built all this," argued the boy, gesturing broadly toward the property stretching around us. "The house, the stables, the educational center, isn't that art too?" The simple and deep perspective took me by surprise. "Yes," I replied slowly, considering the idea. "I think it is. Your grandfather saw potential where others saw only ruins. He imagined beauty where there was only pain. Maybe that is the essence of any true art." Frank nodded, satisfied with this answer, and went back to his drawing. I looked over his shoulder and saw he was painting the centennial oak with Storm's memorial visible below. But he had added something. A figure sitting under the tree, just a silhouette, but clearly a man watching the ranch from above. "It is him," explained Frank, noticing my gaze. "Grandpa Frank, watching everything you built." A wave of emotion went through me, not the sharp pain of loss that had dominated me in the first years, but something more complex, richer. An understanding that Big Frank lived not only in our memories, but in the structures he had created, in the programs we had developed from his initial vision in the values little Frank now absorbed unconsciously. That night, after all the guests left and the ranch returned to its normal rhythm, I walked alone to the centennial oak. The full moon bathed the landscape in silver, creating elongated shadows and transforming the familiar into something almost magical. I sat in the same spot where Big Frank had recorded his last video, revealing the discovery of his mother's diary. The circle seemed complete now. Elisa had hidden historical artifacts to protect them, hoping her son would eventually find them. Frank had transformed the ranch of painful childhood memories into a sanctuary for me and eventually for thousands of other people. And now his namesake grandson grew here, absorbing and continuing that legacy in ways that were still revealing themselves. "We did it, Frank," I murmured to the still night. "Everything you dreamed and much more." The soft wind stirred the oak leaves above, sending a delicate rain of golden petals around me. That same cosmic response I had experienced years ago when I was just beginning to understand the magnitude of what Frank had planned. The next morning, I woke up with renewed clarity about the next chapter for Greenwood and for myself. During breakfast, I shared my thoughts with Jessica. I've been thinking about expanding the art scholarship program I explained specifically for people in life transitions, those who abandoned creative dreams out of necessity and are now trying to rediscover them. Jessica smiled, understanding immediately. "People like you were." "Exactly. I have thought about all the Emilys out there. People with dormant talents interrupted by circumstances, responsibilities, expectations. How many potential artists, writers, musicians never find their way back? It is a wonderful idea," agreed Jessica. "We can develop a specific residential program, maybe combined with mentorships, to help them navigate the return to their creative fields. In the following months, we developed the Second Act program, an initiative dedicated specifically to late-blooming or returning artists. The response was overwhelming, with hundreds of applications from people whose stories resonated with aspects of my own journey. A 67-year-old woman who had abandoned sculpture to raise 3 children alone, now returning to clay with arthritic but determined hands. A 55-year-old former banker finally pursuing his passion for photography after a cancer diagnosis in remission. A 70-year-old retired teacher trying to complete the novel he had started in his youth. Working with these reborn artists, I discovered a new dimension in my own practice. It was no longer just about creating my own works, but about facilitating the creative rebirth of others. The process brought deep satisfaction, rivaling the pleasure of my own artistic achievements. On a significant night reviewing applications for the next class of the program, I found a name that made me pause. Selena Miller, Frank's father's second wife. At 86, she wished to return to the poetry she had abandoned 6 decades ago. I was silenced by a difficult marriage, she wrote in her application. Now, in the twilight of my life, I want to recover. My voice, perhaps understand my own choices better through writing. Her acceptance into the program closed another circle. The woman who had tried unsuccessfully to protect young Frank from his father's resentment would now find her own creative rebirth in the sanctuary he had created. The 10th anniversary of Frank's death was approaching, and with it an important realization. I no longer watched his videos regularly, not because I loved him less, but because his presence had transformed from something I sought externally to something living inside me in the decisions I made, in the way I saw the world. Still on the eve of that anniversary, I felt an urge to re-watch a specific video, the last of the regular series recorded to mark the end of the 2nd year after his departure. As I sat in my studio, the soft lights creating an almost reverent atmosphere, and opened the familiar file. "Hello, my love." Frank began, his serene face filling the screen. "If you are watching this, we have completed 2 years of our posthumous conversation. 2 years in which I tried to accompany you through grief, offering the comfort I could in these pre-recorded videos. He paused, looking directly at the camera as if he could really see me on the other side of the screen, on the other side of time. But now the moment has come for us to change our relationship again. The remaining videos are only for special occasions, milestones you will know how to recognize when they arrive. Not because my love diminishes, but because your life needs to continue moving forward without my constant voice. I nodded in acknowledgement, even though he couldn't see. Emily, when I planned Greenwood, I imagined a refuge for you, a place where you could rediscover your art and find peace after my departure. What I could not foresee was how you would expand that initial vision, transforming it into something much greater than I ever dreamed. Silent tears ran down my face now, not of pain, but of a deep sense of connection through time and loss. My greatest wish was always that you lived fully, not just survived my death, but blossomed despite it. That you found purpose, joy, satisfaction. Seeing you now through time, I know you achieved that and much more. How could he know? How could he foresee so precisely the trajectory my life would take? But that had always been Frank's magic, his ability to see potential where others saw only limitations. From now on, I trust you will follow your own path, guided not by my recorded words, but by your own wisdom and vision. Greenwood is yours to shape as you wish. What started as my last gift to you became your gift to the world. He smiled that crooked smile that had always made my heart race even after decades together. I loved you from the first moment. Emily and I will continue to love you beyond the last. But now it is time for you to live fully in the present, no longer divided between our history and your future. You are ready. You always were. The video ended the screen freezing on his smiling face. I remained sitting in the dark for a long time, absorbing his words, feeling their truth resonate in my being. Frank was right. I was ready. I had been for some time. Ready to carry his legacy not as a weight of responsibility, but as a foundation upon which I would continue to build. Ready to exist fully in my own right, not just as the guardian of his vision. Ready to see Greenwood not as Frank's last gift, but as a living and evolving organism to which many people, including me, had contributed. The next morning, exactly 10 years after finding the mysterious key among Frank's belongings, I woke up with a sense of peace and purpose I hadn't felt since the beginning of our journey together. I dressed with care, choosing vibrant colors instead of the somber black that had dominated my wardrobe in the first years of grief. At breakfast, Jessica noticed the change immediately. "You look different today, Mom." "Lighter." I smiled, pouring myself coffee. "I watched your father's last regular video last night, the one where he essentially releases me from maintaining our constant communication. And how do you feel about it?" "Strangely, I feel as if a circle has closed, as if we completed something important together, even separated by death." Frank, swallowing his cereal, looked at us with curiosity. Did Grandpa know all this was going to happen? He gestured broadly, indicating the vibrant property around us. "Not exactly," I replied, considering the question carefully. "He planted the seeds. He created the conditions for possibilities. But what bloomed here comes from many hands, many hearts, many minds. Including ours," added Jessica. "Especially ours," I agreed. "Your father gave us a start, but we all of us built something he probably couldn't even imagine." After coffee, I walked to the studio and started a new painting. Not the series I had planned on the transformations of Greenwood, but something completely different. An abstract representation of concentric circles in golden tones, interconnected, each emerging from the previous one, expanding infinitely outward. It was not a portrait of Frank, nor a landscape of the ranch, nor even an exploration of grief or loss. It was something new, a visual meditation on how love expands through time, how lives touch other lives in continuous waves of influence and transformation. While I worked, I felt a quiet certainty that Frank would approve of this new direction, not because I needed his approval, but because we had reached this point together. He through his meticulous plans and loving vision, I through my determination to honor his legacy while creating my own. The key I had found among his belongings 10 years ago had opened much more than the gates of a forgotten ranch. It had opened a completely new path of possibilities, not just for me, but for everyone whose lives had been touched by Greenwood. And while the afternoon sun bathed my studio in golden light, the same quality of light Frank had carefully considered. When designing this space, I felt not his absence, but his enduring presence in the world we had created together. Not as a ghost of the past, but as a living force of inspiration, transforming pain into beauty loss, into legacy, ends into new beginnings, an eternal cycle of renewal that would continue far beyond our individual lives. Frank's last promise had not been just the ranch or the videos or the financial security. It had been the promise of a future where I could not only survive without him, but flourish, creating, transforming, inspiring others as he had done for me. It was a promise we both had kept. Now, if you like this story, click on this next video appearing on the screen because in it there is a story of betrayal and plot twists like you have never seen before.